Good day to all of you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story of how the Elder Warrior program originated. My name is Michael Brewer. I'm a combat veteran of the United States Marine Corps and the Vietnam War. I'm a graduate of the Elder Warrior program and currently serve as a team leader and outreach coordinator. We have with us today the two founders of the Elder Warrior Retreat and authors of a most unique 4-day curriculum that addresses the much needed healing through reckoning, reconciliation, and responsibility. The responsibility that comes on the heels of those who served in war and as first responders, including their families and the nation behind them. Every experience in life touches a backstory that sheds light on the meaning of our lives. Our story, our rituals, are often the path to that lasting and enduring meaning that fuels us. Stories and rituals are embedded in the sinew of our lives and jam-packed with promises and surprises. Many of our stories have never been told, and more importantly, have never been subject to deep listening. That is our job. That is our mission. I now introduce you to Father Mike Cicinato, a retired priest of the Diocese of Monterey, California, and Peter Sternberg, a psychotherapist from Chicago, Illinois. Father Mike, speak to us.
How are you doing? Welcome. Glad for this opportunity to share how our retreat came about, and to share the importance of the fact that our relationship showed how other relationships could be healed. And so that is basically pretty much our story. So welcome, Peter. It's good to have my partner with me.
Good to be with you, Mike, and it's good to be with all of you watching and listening.
So basically, I began this journey after I retired as my retirement project, working with veterans with PTSD. And I knew I needed to be immersed in that and to learn from that. So I was directed to read, and particularly to find Dr. Ed Tick, whose book War and the Soul was the inspiration for how this process needed to work. He recognized PTSD as a soul distress, soul problem, and not as a problem of just a mental problem or physical problem, but actually a soul wound. He also devised or actually was able to go back historically and show how different cultures healed that wound for their returning soldiers, going back to the Romans and the Greeks and to Native Americans and all the other cultures. All cultures in past history had a way for people to come back using ritual, starting with being able to tell the story where they were trusted, where the story would be listened to without judgment or critique, without analysis or diagnosis. And that, by the way, is our theme song. And to listen to the stories with respect for the storyteller and the story. It's that which enables all the other processes of healing to happen. The healing from the wounds, the healing from battle loss, the reconciliation and return back to the civilian world, the healing with civilians who could actually hold that story and hold responsibility personally for what we asked our veterans to do. So that became the basis for what we were doing. I met a friend, Pete Pepper, who was a retired captain in the Army who had served in Vietnam a number of times. And he and I began this work together. We worked at helping to establish a veterans treatment court here in our local area, and a program called Central Coast Veterans Helping Veterans. Pete and I went on a retreat with Ed Tick. And while we were there, we watched the process that he used. And it was there that I really began to recognize that there were some skills that I had that could be added to what they were doing that would greatly enhance the retreat, because my skills were in ritual work, men's grief work, and things like of that nature. That was my background. So I returned from that after, and Pete Pepper and I had a discussion that I should really try to create a ritual process using the things that Ed Tick outlined that are necessary for the healing. And so that's what I began to do. It was after that we were invited out into the desert to for a second training session, actually, for PTSD that Ed.T.I.C. ran. And it was there that I met Peter. Peter was introduced to me through my friend Lou Stutzer, Dr. Lou Stutzer, who's now passed away. And Lou was great in helping us establish our Veterans Treatment Court and encouraging me, and yes, encouraging Peter to move into this process. So that we met there. And
That was Joshua Tree, California?
that was
Yeah.
in Joshua Tree, yes. Mhm.
In October of 2013.
Oh my word, 7 years ago.
Yeah. And
Yes, that's a date that is seared into my brain,
yes. So
which we'll hear about in a
why
second.
don't you share how you got there? This is
My very best friend, Lou Stutzer, had been talking about his involvement with you, Mike, and with Pete and the rest of the crew, and let me know that he was going to be joining you all at this training down in Joshua Tree. And he said, boy, you should come to this. This is right up your alley. And I, of course, demurred, saying I can't make it. I had just recently traveled and I couldn't be away from my psychotherapy practice again. And he said, oh, no problem. And he sent Ed.T.I.C.'s book, War and the Soul, over to me. And I read the first chapter and I called him up and said, I'm coming. It was a very compelling read. It was there that I met you, Mike, and you, Mike Brewer, and along with, 50 other people, I think. We went through
It was a big crowd. There was
4 or
even
5 days worth of training.
international presence there.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Israeli pilot.
Mhm.
I was learning a lot. I was taking notes. I was very involved in the exercises that we were doing. And then I heard Ed.T.I.C. talk about reconciliation as being part of the healing process for PTSD. And I'm going to try very hard to convey to you exactly what that felt like, hearing him say the word reconciliation. It was as though all this time going through my life, I had been sitting on a catapult that was loaded up and ready to go, but I didn't realize it. And at the moment that he used the word reconciliation, someone released the catapult and I was airborne. Part of me was still in the room listening to Ed talk and participating in the seminar, and some other part of me was somewhere else. And it was as though I was hearing a voice saying to me, another me saying, I have to go to Germany. Now, the only way that's going to make sense to you is when I explain that I had built my life, lived my life around splitting off any encounters with Germany or Germans, with Poland or Poles, with people from the Eastern Bloc countries. And this had everything to do with intergenerational trauma that had come through to me growing up, being Jewish, and stories of Holocaust combined with my personal experiences with anti-Semitism. So my solution to I'll use the word trauma that I've been carrying within had been to split off that whole region of the world. When I traveled to Europe, I avoided those areas. When I was buying products, I avoided buying products from those areas. I think you could get the sense of what I'm saying. And so here's a voice that has come out of the air, come out of his word reconciliation, saying to me, I have to go to Germany. And I understood at that moment that the splitting off is what I had done all my life, and that actually had to come to an end. And if something had to heal inside of me, and in order for that healing to take place, the splitting had to come to an end. I was shaken as a result of that training and did not let go of the idea. I came home from that training and I began a 13-month plunge back into history, studying the history yet again, and combining that with a plunge into my personal history, which
That was your first experience of how deep splitting is? Such a simple concept, splitting.
It's a great question, Mike. I would say that it was my first experience with a consciousness around it. I had done this splitting very consciously, as opposed to people who find themselves splitting things off and not realizing it. I knew full well that I had split this all off, and I was living with that as being quite okay. I was quite okay with it. And the rude awakening was how much I wasn't okay with it.
Had you ever heard the term soul wound prior to that, or an emphasis on soul wound as opposed to psychodynamic wound?
Nothing in my training, nothing in my work, although I think the best of my work, both as a patient and the best of my work as a therapist, help people deal with soul. I had not incorporated that into my thinking conceptually, and nor had I ever characterized wounds as being soul wounds. That was the thing that I was introduced to in Ed Tick's work, and it built on, his work builds on the work of Jonathan Shea, who is a psychiatrist who's done quite a bit of work with Vietnam vets. He's dedicated his entire career to working with Vietnam vets and really began probing the soul concept here. But I first encountered soul wound when I was at that training and read his book, War in the Soul. So I was now thinking about and experiencing what I had been carrying as a soul wound for the first time in my life.
So just to also point out that the soul wound and the splitting piece from the soul are precisely what we're talking about when we talk PTSD. PTSD of necessity, and the training and all the other things that go on in the military require you to separate so you can focus on the mission. And whether you focus on your own personal mission of your own personal life, which we all do, or whether the mission is our military mission, that's where that splitting takes place so that we can do that. And of course, my thing is we do a good job of training people to do that because they can do it on their own anyway, as you described, but we don't do a good job of reconnecting afterwards, which is the reconciliation part.
That's where the combat veteran term parallel lives comes from.
That's
so parallel lives and splitting have a marriage there.
Right. And it's only when there's a trusting situation where that can be heard that the healing can happen. And that's the part where I think Peter, I'd share, I was working, afterwards, still working on the retreat, and I get this call from Lou saying, well, Peter, I think Peter needs to talk to you. Would you be okay with that? And I said, yes. So Peter, I'll let you lead that because again, that's,
Yeah, I was miles away from a trusting situation as I was in this plunge. I was in a horror story, and I use those words to be descriptive of how hard it was on me. To revisit the legacy story of the Jewish people, the 20th century story of the Jewish people, the story of my extended family, and fourthly, my personal story. All those things came together in a confluence of horror as I parsed through it all. And I heard about a retreat that was being run on a yearly basis by the Zen Peacemakers, a 5-day bearing witness retreat at the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. And I postponed my objective of getting to Germany in order to attend this retreat. And it was a wise move on my part. So I was scheduled to attend and did attend the November 2014 Bearing Witness Retreat at Auschwitz. But in preparation for that, it was a mess. And I was having fierce feelings of rage, of fear, coming up as I pondered all of the history that I just shared with you. And I knew that I had to have some kind of encounter with a representative of Christianity. It didn't have to be a particular denomination, but it needed to be someone in a position of authority from Christianity, from a church. And in talking this over with my friend Lou, he said, well, you know, Mike, you could approach him. Well, I did know Mike. We had a new friendship. And I was about to test that friendship by approaching him and giving him a sense of what I was up against and needing to unload. And would he be willing to participate in that process with me? And Mike said he absolutely would. It was clear to both of us that neither of us had done this before, ever. And without any real preparation and over the phone, because he's in California and I'm in Chicago, we went in. I held back nothing.
that's true.
And Mike will comment further on.
Father Mike, they didn't teach you how to bear this cross in the seminary, right?
Well,
Oh no.
all of them, but they could be, this one was a major surprise.
Oh no. Yeah. He's more to say about that.
Yeah.
But what I brought to him was the full-on histories that I already told you I was in, the 4 different histories that I was in. My personal history is something I don't talk about very much. That's changing as I do this interview with you all. As an adolescent, I went to a military school. And it was there that I had my first lived experience with anti-Semitism, and it was brutal. It ranged from subtle persecution to violent persecution. Here's an example of the subtle persecution. We had to attend chapel every day. And even though there were some handful of us Jewish cadets amongst the Corps, we were forced to kneel and forced to pray as though we were Christian. To not do that and to be caught not doing that would have brought great wrath down upon us. When the Jewish cadets were allowed to meet up with local families to celebrate Jewish holidays, when we left our rooms to exit the dormitory and exit the campus to have that celebration, we faced a gauntlet of old boys. I was a new boy. The stories I'm telling you are from my new boy experience. This was a plebe system which had hazing built into it, which was tough on every new boy, but particularly harsh for the Jewish cadets. So the gauntlet was a line of old boys with their belts out, and we were whipped as we exited our rooms, went down the hallway to leave the dormitory. And there was a singular event that happened to me. I'm not aware of it happening to any other Jewish cadet, but perhaps it did. On an occasion, 5 old boys came into my room and took a broom pole and ran that broom pole down the sleeves of my long sleeve shirt so that the broom pole stuck out of the ends of my shirt, here, here. So I'm like this. In each of our rooms, there was a rail that was about 5 feet off the floor that had hooks on it. We would hang our rifles on these hooks. They picked me up and put the broom pole on the hooks, and there I hung on the wall. They told me I was crucified and jeered, mocked, laughed. It's hard for me to remember exactly the things that were said. I remember their laughter. I have no recollection how long this went on. Obviously, they took me down, and the incident never occurred again. I didn't speak of it. I felt like I needed to endure it in order to remain a cadet there. And so although I never forgot it, I didn't talk about it, certainly didn't process it. It came up in the therapy work that I did as a patient, but it certainly didn't come up in any encounter that I had with a non-Jewish person, let's put it that way. The reason that I knew that I had to deal with this is that as I was going through this plunge and before I called Mike, I had a strange onset of pain in both of my shoulders. I thought maybe I had worked out too hard or something like that. And then an odd sensation formed, an oval shape from the base of my skull to the top of my spine became a patch of cold skin. It felt as though the heat of my body was pouring out of this hole in the back of my neck. It was the most bizarre set of sensations. Pain in my shoulders, this patch at the back of my neck that was cold. I'd be working out, sweating, and have a sweatshirt wrapped around my neck because I was so cold back there. I would sit with a heating pad on my neck. I talked to one of my mentors that I turned to for guidance and meditation, and he said, "Have you ever had an injury there?" I said, "No." And then it came back to me that actually I did have an injury there. It wasn't anything that I had registered as an injury, but it was clear to me, especially considering the context of this plunge into history, my history, that my body was remembering what happened in that room. That's how I knew I needed to talk about that with Mike.
So let me interject here a little bit. So, part of what's going on here is, and as Peter will tell you, he was also reading a book, I think, Constantine Return.
Constantine's Sword.
Constantine's Sword. And of course, the implication of Christianity, we as Christians have been horrific in our treatment of the Jewish people from the very beginning, even though our very founder was Jewish. And the one we pray to, celebrate is Jewish. There's been this in Christianity, which also still needs to be healed. But again, I represented the church, and so when Peter first came to me, he asked to, he wanted to open up. Well, he presented to me, actually, Peter's very articulate. He presented me a lot of writings, and I was finding my tortured way through his tortured writings, which were describing the pain, and it was intermingled with history. And what the element I want to interject here before I turn it back to Peter is that this energy, I recognize this energy was cosmic. He was tapping into something that was much bigger than any single human being. And I think that's also the injuries that soldiers experience in battle and in combat tap into things that are cosmic. So the energy is bigger than they themselves. And they're tapping into something huge. And unless you can move that energy in a healthy way, it will destroy you. All right? And what I remembered at that point in time was in the Native American warrior sweat, which is a sweat that's about to the 10th power of a normal sweat. Okay, when you're in this heat, in this intense heat, in a tightly enclosed space, I remember that I had the privilege of experiencing that with the Navajo people. And I remember in that experience, and I would not have been able to go through it, had not the ritual elder that was leading it, the shaman that was leading it, said, "Don't fight the heat. It's bigger than you and will kill you. You have to let it go through you." And there was something in me that in my body, that it was not in my head, it was in my body, that sort of snapped and said, "I can do that." And that's how I was able to experience that. But I learned at that time that the energy, when you're working with people, we do deal with cosmic energy. And if you're dealing with that energy and you're trying to fight it or you're trying to block it, it will kill you. Okay, it won't work for them or for you. But you have to allow that energy to go through you. It takes a lot of energy to do that. So
I'm sure Mike and Peter, our listeners, the combat veterans in particular, don't need to be reminded that the holding of trauma, bodily or spiritually, is just not possible. It really holds you until there's a release of some sort, which I'm sure you guys will get to pretty quickly here. But the similarities here are just uncanny of your personal experience, and then putting it on a global plane is accurate. That's healing needs to be done inside, outside, and in the culture. And that's what you guys have figured out how to bottle here.
It's precisely the energy, it was precisely the insight of that particular Navajo ritual, Native American ritual, that dealing with returning warriors, you're dealing with the energy that is locked up, or the energy that they're trying to block or to fight. And it's much bigger than they are. And so it's a good ritual does in your body what you need to do, not just in your head. It's not something you're thinking about, but your body is, and it's, since you're so connected with your soul and your body, this type of thing is what precisely what veterans and others coming from war need to do.
And it's wordless.
Find a way to allow it to go through and out so that it doesn't destroy them. Okay, and it's particularly hard, I think, with veterans because you people who know it, you're trained to fight. You're trained to fight the enemy. Okay, and in this one, this is an insight where you win the battle by allowing the energy to go through you rather than slam you.
So what,
And it's completely wordless.
one of the
First Nation people have figured out how to transcend the Judeo-Christian world of words. You know, you don't think much before you kill. So I guess you don't think much when you're exiting that at the same time.
Right. So,
Mike, one of the things that you made clear to me was how you were affected, how you were physically affected by going through this with me.
yeah, I'll tell you that. Okay, so there's certain things I guess I wimp out on. Okay, I don't like, you know, extreme language. Okay, and I don't generally use it. Okay, well, of course, working with the veterans, I've learned, okay, that's, you're going to be dealing with that. Working with Peter, I was dealing with that too, as he was describing this, and it felt literally, I could feel the energy of it. I knew I had to listen without that judgment or critique or analyzing it or anything, just to be there and to respectfully listen. But I physically felt it in my own body. And I felt the venom of all this stuff that had happened, particularly when he told me that story that he just told us. I felt the cosmic energy in the way it was shared. I recognized, of course, and I knew all before this, but I recognized here is an example of the guilt of our church, okay, in terms of participating in inflicting things on people, in this case, the Jewish people, that were totally wrong. And we needed forgiveness. We needed to ask for forgiveness. We needed to apologize. And I felt particularly that I needed, as we went into this right at the very beginning, to tell Peter that, okay, I am a representative of the church. And in the name of that church, I ask forgiveness and I apologize and I ask, how can I walk a journey of healing with you in this process? Because that's our atonement, that's our reconciliation. So I felt it was important to do that, and it is what I chose to do. But that opened all kinds of doors. Then.
Well, I'd like to pick up on that. It was stunning to me, the give and take that we had and how long this went on for. It wasn't just one brush through and one from me and one response from you. This was a process. It was back and forth and back and forth. And as many times as I was speaking about raw, powerful, mind-bending feelings and experiences, ranging from paranoia to rage to intense sadness and loss. As much as I went through that, you spoke, you received it. You received it. And this experience of the receiving became for us part of the template. Let me expand that for you. We emerged, Mike and I emerged from our conversations with an understanding that there had been a reckoning. Me on my part, and he on his part. And what I heard from Mike was responsibility taking. No defense, no explanation, just receiving and responsibility taking. When I heard that, when I felt it, things shifted in me. And I would say that at that moment, I had the experience of reconciliation. It was reconciliation with him, it was reconciliation with Christianity, it was reconciliation within myself.
This is such an organic progression. It's not between the two of you. I'm sure our listeners are catching this walk through the woods here, but it's so organic that there's no teacher at the front of the class. This is coming right from heart to us. It's pretty amazing.
And that is the model.
It just happened. It literally, well, my words for it, it just happened. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, it happened, was right.
You mean after you wrote the Torah for him?
All kinds of stuff was happening, yeah. And I the thing was, I was physically, emotionally and physically and spiritually feeling. I was feeling it on all the levels of my being. And again, thanks to that training from Navajo, or that one insight that allowed me to allow it to move through, but it also became the model for suddenly all of the ritual process that we had been looking at in terms of retreat. Suddenly those things fell into place. It became the model for that, because I had become stuck. I was doing the rituals and I become stuck in this one area of grief, and particularly with responsibility taking. And what happened, dealing with particularly the area of guilt. I've learned that I suspect that all people who have been in war feel somewhere along the line some kind of guilt, but I can't name that for anybody else.
Survivor guilt or guilt?
Any kind, any and all.
It could be all kinds of things, but it's very different with each person. So some felt guilty for being there, some didn't. I remember guys telling me, "Look, Father, I went and I went believing I was serving my country and I was doing the best I can under circumstances you guys can't even understand, to survive and to help my buddies survive." Right? And I don't feel guilt. So we experienced that. Then there were others who felt tremendous guilt. So we wanted to be able to deal with the guilt issue with healing without at the same time imposing guilt. And I found that in other processes that it was very easy to sort of say, "You're guilty, you need to do this." And I experienced the people reacting to that. I spent time actually in some of those processes dealing with that, with them, helping them to process it. And so that became, that was a stumbling block for me. And that's when I had asked Peter after our process to help me with the retreat. It's when he became the co-author. And
let me back up 1 second, guys. So to go back to Joshua Tree and maybe steal Soren Kierkegaard's phrase, the leap of faith, what you saw missing in Joshua Tree was this. Edward Tick does a fabulous job of the War of the Soul and Stone movement. This touches on what you guys found missing.
Well, what I saw as critical was that first, that listening without judgment or critique, without analysis or diagnosis. And inherently, I've seen in all kinds of programs that happen. In other words, you're going along and then all of a sudden somebody says something that's a critique or it's an analysis, or gosh, I remember some guy reacting one time saying, "Your country screwed you," and this, that, and that did not help. Actually, that immediately stopped the healing that was going on. And it was a civilian doing that. But this is why it was so critical. And in our retreat process, we actually make people swear an oath to listen that way at the beginning, as you know, Mike. And we make a very big thing of it, but that creates the trust. Without that, bottom line, no healing can really happen. Okay, no healing can happen because the story has to be heard without judgment for healing to start to happen. Then you can deal with the wounds, the battles, the losses, the guilt, all of that stuff. But until then, you can't deal with that. If that can't happen.
Well, and sometimes the stories don't have coherent cores.
Exactly.
To take Peter's concept of splitting, I mean, I was convinced I was fighting communism. And then you have the people on the other side that say your country screwed you. Well, who are you going to go to happy hour with?
Yeah.
So you ultimately just don't really choose any friends. And there enters the loss of intimacy.
And so that became the insight that guided our retreat. And then the other insights that came that Peter contributed so much with, and I think is probably because not only his experience, I think his experience and training, but actually his experience in terms of the reconciliation and the need for that and the need for the restoration of the relationship. So, for example, we want civilians on the retreat to own personal responsibility for what we asked our veterans to do. I mean, whether we agree with war or not, it's not a matter of believing in war or not. I'm a pacifist. I don't think war is a good solution. But I have a personal responsibility for every military person that goes into war for me and my family. Listen, I have a responsibility to them, especially for when to support them and giving them the best training and the best that I can give them and help support them with, but also when they come home to receive and own personal responsibility for what I've asked them to do, including what they did in combat. And that's the critical, the critical piece in our retreat that was, I think, that's been brought to fore with what Peter and I experienced. So it's not just there's healing for the veterans, and we deal with the story, we deal with the loss, we deal with the wounds, we deal with all of those things in dramatic ways. We remember those who were lost in a very powerful way. But we also have to deal with the restoration where civilians say to the servicemen, and say it with real truth, what can I do to walk this journey with you? Okay, what can I do to be a better citizen of this nation? Right? So we seek from the veterans their insights, and they have them. Okay, they laid their lives on the line for them. So those pieces are really critical to what we do in our process, in our program, what we try to lead people to do. And we know, okay, none of us are going to claim that we heal people. We begin a process of healing that is a lifetime. I think all our lives are about a lifetime of healing. Okay, but we begin a process which allows the healing and opens the doors and gives the tools to walk the journey of healing for all of us. But we've had some really dramatic experiences. I mean, my most dramatic was one guy after the first, the first full day of the retreat, Vietnam vet come to me and said, Father Mike, last night I slept for the first time for the full night without nightmares since Vietnam. Now, I'd love that to be everybody's experience, but that was his experience. Okay, so it's a process that we begin with people that gives an opportunity for that. And it came out of, again, our having to wrestle with the truth of Peter's Jewishness and the experience of the Jewish people throughout history, Christianity's experience with it. Okay, and so we had to wrestle with the cosmic issue ourselves so that we could then feel like, okay, I can now invite you into the cosmic experience of wrestling with your cosmic experience of war, combat, and all that went along with it.
I feel somewhat obliged to offer that in my 73rd year, I never thought splitting, I thought the split was permanent most of my life. And I'm talking about even after participating in probably 15 years of retreat volunteerism and all that. Prior to meeting you guys, I just thought that our tribe, the Marines, the combat soldiers with all of our ribbons and lettuce and stuff, that we would always essentially be separate from you. You'd listen occasionally, and then the proverbial Nam phrase, oh honey, pass the salt. That the story would never go beyond 2, 3, 5 minutes. until Elder Warrior comes along. And it's just so significantly different to the point I don't even think I really knew what the split is. If you're split, you probably don't even know that you're permanently split from the rest of society. You just adapt, because we're pretty adaptable human beings. You just adapt and you live with it until one day, like Peter's experience, it all converges and you say, oh my God, I can still be part of humanity and they can be part of me. Oh, and they'll accept me.
Mm-hmm. And that
that is a key thing that you just said, Mike. The feeling of acceptance is linked with the responsibility taking that the civilians bring to the vets. Our retreat isn't our retreat without that piece. That is the piece that makes what we do unique. It isn't veterans talking to therapists. It isn't veterans talking to each other. It's veterans being received by civilians who are there for the purpose that Mike presented himself to me to receive, and responsibility, without judgment, without diagnosis, without critique or analysis, to receive and say, yes, yes, this happened. It happened because I have a stake in this. I, as a citizen, now I'm going to move it out of the religious story. I, as a citizen, have an absolute stake in the military. I have a full-on stake in what happens to every woman and man in the military. You're having the experiences that you're having because of and for me and my family. Anything that happened, any distortion, any wound, any moral or religious or spiritual quandary that you were in is mine too. I can't lift it off of you, but I can tell you it's mine also.
My friend Gary Nickerson, you might remember, Mike and Peter came to the closing supper on San Juan Bautista there. He came down from Scotts Valley, and he says, as we part that day, my God, these people seem so happy. What did you do there? I think that's what he said. What did you do? I said, well, they accept each other like you did, meaning me. He's been a friend for 50 years. And that was my answer. I said, well, they accept each other. That's what they do here.
And what's interesting, what I want to share too is this. I suspect it's easy to compare. There are tons of processes and healing journeys of a variety of, of possibilities that are out there right now. And I'd say, okay, I'm glad they're all out there. I'm not one that wants to compare ours to anybody else's. This is the journey that we have found to be helpful and effective. It came because we walked the journey, for example, with Ed Tick and his people, and we walked the journey with others that we learned from. And so we're all a part of a great healing process. Without the people that went before us, we would not be, okay? And again, my training with Richard Brewer, the Franciscan priest, and the men's work that he does. Without that training and men's grief work and some of the ritual, we wouldn't be there. We build on the shoulders of those people.
I'd like you guys to say something to the listeners of the mixture of veterans and civilians, because that is a point of distinction from other retreats. Why did you decide to do this half and half attendees?
Well, we do a little bit. We do a few more veterans than civilians.
Yeah.
We like to keep a balance, more veterans than civilians. Okay. And because I'm not sure that if we didn't, that might tip the thing in terms of, I mean, we do a lot to build the trust. We work hard at it. So, but I think that having a plurality of veterans there is we learned that, and that's what we do intentionally. But we keep it fairly close. We don't want to let less than a third of that, or so between a third and a half in that range in there, but more veterans. And
But that's what makes the ritual work, right?
well, exactly, because our primary purpose is their healing. Okay. This we found that our program could be adapted and do a lot of healing for other civilians with PTSD as well. Okay. And we experimented with that, and we came back to our primary focus, partly because of the intensity of it. This requires some skills, and we've been wanting to reach out with people that have skills. We need somebody skilled in ritual who can hold that cauldron, okay, of the people that are there, where all that intensity can happen without destroying it, where we hold everybody safe. We don't do therapy, okay, but we need a therapist there so that if somebody reacts or somebody goes into a crisis, we have the tools to help walk that person through that journey to healing. And you've seen how that's happened, we touch sensitive things when we're dealing with this, but you have to deal with the truth of what really happened. And those are deeply wounding, harsh things. So that's what we have to have the trust for. So at any rate, this is why we do what we why we do what we do.
38 years been married to her.
Nice to see your wife there, Mike.
Yeah.
So we like I say, we build on this. And here's the other thing. I'm going to tell you my personal thing, and this is with Peter. Okay, this is about revisions. We learn every time we've done this, we see things that could be happening better, and we know that this is an ongoing thing. Okay, and the story was it was always we would get to the final thing about ready to do what we were doing, print out what we needed to do to the people we needed and all that, and then Peter would say, "Oh well, Mike, on this there's this one more little thing," and so I would go, "Oh, another thing." And finally, one day he says, "Well, is this revision number 50?" And I said, "No, Mike, this is with Peter. This is revision 5,652.6." But we do feel this is a process that has to be alive, and to stay alive, it has to be revised. You have to learn from the things you experience. We have had the veterans teach us a ton, including you, Mike, teach us a ton about what we need to do. And particularly with the two of us not being veterans, how would we dare even approach that if we didn't have people like you as our advisors and consultants and teachers, all right? And the other piece that I want to put out there that gives hope is when I was taking the training for this, I went to New Zealand to visit the Maori people and to listen to their process. And they basically, I loved how straightforward they were. They said, "Okay, well, it's like this." Well, Mike, it's okay. They have to be reconnected to God, reconnected to nature and creation, reconnected to people. And until that happens, we can't let them back in the community. You know? And so this is about reconnection. But it was there also that I met Vietnam vets from New Zealand, and they were overwhelmed. One guy they were snipers. They carry a double wound, as you in the military know, and would tell you, "I don't know that I can ever be forgiven. You know, I hope I can, but I don't think I can." And
You know, Father Mike, the program I did 20 years ago incorporated Lakota Sioux ceremonies, which were quite good. I don't need to share them with you. They're wordless, and they just penetrate right through your soul.
Yeah.
But as we parted at the end of the training, one of the vets says, "Isn't this the irony of the 21st century? We destroy the Native Americans, we get rid of them, we give them blankets with typhoid, and now the Veterans Administration uses their rituals to heal our warriors."
Exactly. Well, the other
Who'd have known?
Yeah. And the other piece I wanted to enter in that, it was at that point in my training that I looked at this and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is huge. This is impossible. Where do we even start? And the insight, again, coming from my spirituality, the insight I believe that God gave me, because it certainly didn't come from me, but the insight was this: you deal with the people that are directly in front of you with the best love you can, and I will take care of the rest. I will take care of success and failures, all of that other stuff. So again, this is how we, in our process, we approach this. We want to be with the best love, understanding, healing, hearing, listening that we can be. And then the rest, you know, the higher powers, people would like to say, the bigger, the cosmic aspect of this is all involved in our healing with us. And we participate in it. And that's why I believe it works. And that's why I believe that all the veterans' responses that we've gotten on our retreat so far have all been positive. And I think that's amazing.
Well, and many of us are still in touch with each other.
Yeah.
And I haven't kept numbers, and I wouldn't do such a thing. But
That's
it does seem that I'm in touch with more graduates of Elder Warrior than I am the other retreats. Through Facebook, through email, whatever.
This is something that we found on the retreat that we did right from the start. We told people right on the first day, we want you to meet, and as you're meeting these people, find someone that you will stay in communication with for the rest of your life. And at least one other person that you're going to be able to communicate with, because what we've done here, much of it is confidential. It can't be shared, you know. But find somebody that you can be connected to, and those groups are the people that have done that are very healthy. In those groups, there's healing still happening. So yeah.
I think that you, our listener, pretty much have right there a sense of the serendipitous, destiny-driven, however you frame it, powerful story that landed a retired Catholic priest and a Jewish psychotherapist living in different parts of the country together. And together, when I use the word together here, what I mean is connected and profoundly respectful, touching and appreciative of each other's experiences and offerings. And we've been able to blend what each of us brings in a way that is so deeply touching. The acceptance that you spoke of, Mike Brewer, the acceptance that you noted with your friend is palpable. The group that goes through the experience becomes a group of one. The barriers between us break down, we feel as one. And that to me is the profound and touching experience over and over again every time we do the retreat.
You know, a plug for Gary Nickerson there. I just remembered what he did when he came to visit my home after the retreat. First person that's ever done this, and the last person that's ever done it. We sat out in my garage and he interviewed me for 4.5 hours. He said, I want to hear the rest of the story. We were making fun of Paul Harvey, you know. I want to hear the rest of the story. And he sat out there with a tape recorder and he recorded, I still have it, 4 hours of questions, which is a byproduct of what he heard was done at the retreat. I'd like to see that happen in every soldier, every veteran's life.
Boy, we would too. And we would like for this to move beyond Mike and me. We would like to be able to train folks if we could and have this be a template that goes way beyond what we're able to do, right, Mike?
Yes. This actually, this requires certain, as I mentioned earlier, real skills. And I'm not saying, for example, that we're the most skillful of it, but we have, those skills are really important. And we need, for example, our team is at least 2 veterans or more, plus Peter and I. That's our team for this retreat. And each brings into it a certain skills. We are looking to find people with skills, some of the therapeutic skills that Peter has. Not all therapists can do it, okay, and can handle the abreactions quickly. We need somebody who understands the ritual and how to hold the energy, the intense energy that's going on there to help keep people from abreacting and keeping them safe. And knowing when appropriate to break the regular rules so that you do that which is safest and more healing. So those are skills, and we would delighted to have people, join us in this process. We would like to see it definitely go beyond us, and so that's
quite a challenge, and I don't know that anyone could do it outside the 2 of you guys. I mean, the training, they can do it, particularly since this soul wound thing has become so vogue. I mean, it's in the dominant culture right now, but quite frankly, it still falls in what you would know, Peter, what Fritz Perls called the subject of aboutism, and the thing that veterans absolutely cannot stand, and that's the checklist PTSD program, they call it.
Yeah.
Oh yes, you're experiencing insomnia. Yes, you have hypervigilance. Yes. Checklist therapy. And I wouldn't say that all the soul wound stuff falls in that category, but I see it, I hear it on the internet everywhere, and much of it does. None of it does anything like this.
Well, thank you.
Mike Brewer, thanks for guiding us through this discussion.
Yes, and thank you for all the other things that you've added, particularly your military experience and your background and your love and dedication to the process, because you have made it richer for both of us as well as for everybody that's been.
Oh, this is a retreat. As I said to my wife this morning, I don't think I know anything else. For the listeners, I can't say this would save your marriage, but I will tell you, it'll put you on the path to making for a more peaceful marriage. I do recall one time when a veteran, you saw my wife walk in the background there, when a guy says to me, you can't be a Vietnam veteran, you're still married to your first wife. Well,
along those lines, Mike, one of the veterans that works as a consultant with us, okay, and I won't name him because I don't want to embarrass him and I have his permission, but anyway, he's a Vietnam vet with all that, and his wife came on the retreat, okay, as one of the civilians, not on a retreat with where he was. Now, we've had husband and wives on the retreat, civilian and that, and effectively, but she came, and he thanks me regularly. In fact, I'm going to be having dinner with him tonight. He thanks me because he said, my wife now understands me and understands when I'm quiet and when I'm doing all these things. And thank you, because you've saved my marriage. Well, actually, you save your own marriages, but her understanding of particularly the silences a lot of times with the vets, the angers, the frustration, all those other things, that makes a tremendous difference. And so, yeah, it does work both ways. And I encourage you.
A good comedian might say that we're really lucky at Elder Warrior by having a Catholic priest and a Jewish psychotherapist. We got a corner on guilt.
Yes, we got the guilt down really, really good.
Yeah.
We
know what to do.
Tell the listeners where the retreat is.
The best way to track that is to look at the website, because the current information, as soon as we know when we're going to do it and where we're going to do it, it's going to be on the website.
Right.
That's how to know.
And we've done it before in San Juan Bautista at the St. Francis Retreat Center there, too, and very effectively. We need a place that has lots of space and quiet, and we need a place with good food. Those are also very essential pieces of the process. So that.
Okay, so dear listeners, we may be putting up some resources at the end of this interview that you can and see the references they made to Shea and Edward Tick, both of them being specialists in war and PTSD. And I think we are nearing the end. Look at these smiles. These guys smiled for 4 days. Well, mostly 4 days.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Peter. And I want to thank
Mike squared.
our editor. I want to thank all
Namaste.
involved in making this happen. It's a work of love, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
It is agape in action.
Right.
See you next time, guys.
Well, take care out there.
Okay, you too.